On June 17th, 1933, 5 men died in about 30 seconds outside Union Station in Kansas City. 4 lawmen and the prisoner they'd come to rescue cut down in a parking lot in broad daylight. The FBI put a name to one of the shooters almost immediately, and that name handed J. Edgar Hoover everything he'd been waiting for. If you've seen Public Enemies, you've already met the man they blamed. He's the Channing Tatum cameo, gunned down in the first act so the movie can get on with chasing Dillinger. But the real pretty boy, Floyd, swore, right up to the day the Bureau shot him dead, that he was never there. And if he was telling the truth, the FBI was built on the wrong man. Nobody was paying attention to Charlie Floyd back when it might have mattered. He was a sharecropper's son, born on a Georgia farm in 1904, hauled west to the Cookson Hills of eastern Oklahoma when he was 7. Rock scrub and mortgage paper, the kind of country that got forgotten on purpose. If you'd gone looking for the most dangerous man in America out in those hills, you'd have walked right past him. That was about to change, and it started with $3.50. That's what he stole first. $3.50 in coins out of a local post office when he was 18. It's almost sweet as origin stories go. It didn't stay sweet. By 1925, he'd graduated to a payroll robbery in St. Louis and drawn 5 years in the Missouri pen. And he came out the other side of that sentence a different animal. Prison didn't rehabilitate a man like Floyd. It handed him a professional network and a grudge. Somewhere in those years, he picked up the name he'd spend the rest of his life hating. Some say a girlfriend named Beulah Baird pinned it on him over a card game. Others say an oil rig crew mocked the clean white shirt he wore to work the fields, or that a robbery victim once described him as a pretty boy with apple cheeks. Floyd hated all 3 versions. A man building a reputation for murder does not want to be introduced as pretty boy, but the papers loved it, and the papers always win. They'd have plenty to write about soon enough, because the state of Ohio was about to learn that convicting Charlie Floyd and keeping him were 2 very different things. By 1930, the small time was over. Floyd tore through Ohio that year, picked up in Akron under a false name in connection with a dead police officer, then again in Toledo for bank robbery. That November, he was convicted of robbing the bank at Sylvania and handed 12 to 15 years in the Ohio State Penitentiary. He never served it. He got off the train that was taking him to prison and vanished. And from that morning on, Charlie Floyd was a fugitive. He stayed one until the day he died. 4 years on the run, and he spent every one of them working. What he did for a living was rob banks, and he was relentless at it. The number people settle on is around 30, though nobody could keep an honest count, because half the Midwest blamed every unsolved holdup on him, whether he was within 100 miles of it or not. He worked across Ohio and Missouri and Oklahoma with a rotating crew living out of cars and rented rooms. And back home in Oklahoma, he got so busy that bank insurance rates reportedly doubled while he was active. That's the kind of number that makes accountants cry. One man, and the actuaries had to redo the math for an entire state. The most Floyd thing he ever did was rob the bank in his own hometown. November 1932, Sallisaw, Oklahoma, 11:30 in the morning, full daylight, with his partner George Birdwell beside him and Aussie Elliott behind the wheel. Half the customers in that bank knew him by his first name. There was no mistaking who it was, and that was the whole point. He and Birdwell took the assistant cashier hostage, walked out with about $2,500 while his neighbors watched, and turned the man loose once they were clear of town. And some of those neighbors, if you believe the stories, cheered. Picture a wanted man robbing the bank in the town where his mother lives in front of people who'd known him since he was a boy and not even bothering to cover his face. That isn't just crime. That's a man who'd decided the rules had quietly stopped applying to him. The bodies stacked up alongside the money. A federal agent named Curtis Burke shot dead in Kansas City in 1931. A former sheriff, Irv Kelly, killed in an Oklahoma ambush the next spring. Floyd was a suspect in the deaths of two Kansas City brothers, Wally and Bull Ash, rum runners found shot inside a burning car. And then there's the watch. When they finally killed him, Floyd was said to be carrying a pocket watch notched 10 times, one mark for every man he'd put in the ground. I'd say that watch is the least believable detail in the whole story, exactly the kind of thing a legend grows the way a hull grows barnacles. But it hardly matters whether it's literally true, because the men around him really were dying, and he really was the reason. There was another story running right alongside the body count. Out in the Cookson Hills, the tale went that when Floyd robbed a bank, he'd tear up the mortgage papers on his way out the door. And whether or not that ever really happened, a lot of dirt poor families decided the one man shooting back at the banks was theirs. But the bank jobs and the dead sheriffs and the mortgage legends aren't what made him a household name. The thing that turned Charlie Floyd from a regional outlaw into the most wanted man in the country happened at a train station, and the timing of it was almost too perfect for the man who stood to gain the most. That man wasn't Floyd. If you want to know how a bank robber ends up buried by tens of thousands of people as a hero, stay with me, because that's exactly where this is heading. Subscribe if you like your history with the myths pulled off it. While Floyd was knocking over banks in Oklahoma, a much bigger fight was playing out in Washington, and he had no idea he was about to become the center of it. In 1933, the Bureau of Investigation was a small outfit of accountants and lawyers who couldn't legally carry a gun or make an arrest. J. Edgar Hoover wanted that to change. And to change it, he needed a monster the whole country could agree to be afraid of. On the morning of June 17th, he got one. Frank Nash was a federal prisoner, an Oklahoma bank robber being escorted back to Leavenworth. Lawmen brought him into Kansas City by train and walked him out to a Chevrolet parked at the curb outside Union Station. Nash sat in the front seat. Agents and a visiting police chief packed in around him. A green Plymouth sat maybe 15 feet away. Two men stepped out from behind it with machine guns, and one of them shouted, "Up, up." Then the world came apart. The two Kansas City officers, William Grooms and Frank Hermanson, died where they stood. Chief Otto Reed of McAllister died in the car. FBI agent Raymond Caffrey died on the way to the hospital. And Frank Nash, the man the whole thing was supposedly meant to save, was killed in the very same burst of fire. Whoever did it freed nobody. They just left 5 dead men in half a minute and drove off. Within days, the Bureau had a name for one of the gunmen, and the name was Floyd. And this is where the story stops being simple, because Floyd said it wasn't him. He said it in writing first on a postcard postmarked Springfield, Missouri, less than 2 weeks after the killings. I, Charles Floyd, want it made known that I did not participate in the massacre of officers at Kansas City. He said it again, out loud, as he lay dying in an Ohio field a year and a half later. 2 chances to unburden himself, and he spent both of them denying the one crime that made him famous. And there's this. For more than a year after Union Station, Floyd did something he had never done before. He disappeared. He went to ground back east under the name George Sanders, and all but stopped robbing banks, which is either exactly what a guilty man does or exactly what an innocent one does once he understands how much trouble the Bureau's accusation has just bought him. Now, killers lie, but the historians who've spent careers on this, people like Michael Wallace and Robert Unger, have argued that Floyd and his partner were framed, that the physical evidence never fit, that one of the real Union Station gunmen was shot in the shoulder during the fight, and Floyd's body, when they finally had it on a slab, carried no such wound. So let me be straight with you about where this lands. Nobody can prove Floyd was innocent, and nobody can prove he was guilty. The documentary record just refuses to close. And what gets me is that the case nobody could prove is the exact case that built the modern FBI. because by then it was never really about Floyd anymore. The Kansas City Massacre was the atrocity Hoover had been waiting for. Congress looked at 4 dead lawmen outside a train station and in 1934 handed the Bureau the power to carry firearms and make arrests. The armed federal police force that exists today, the one that would run down Dillinger and Nelson and eventually Floyd himself, was born out of that single morning at Union Station. Floyd's name is welded to the founding of the FBI, and he may not have fired one shot. If you ask me, that's the real story the movie had sitting right there, and instead it used the man for a scene change. The rest came fast. In July 1934, the Bureau finally caught up with John Dillinger outside a Chicago movie theater and shot him dead on the sidewalk. The most wanted slot in America came open, and there was only ever one man to fill it. Floyd was named public enemy number 1 with a federal bounty of $23,000 on his head. Dead or alive, on top of what Oklahoma's governor had already posted, he was 30 years old. He was the single most hunted human being in the United States, and he was running out of the one thing the papers never bothered to mention: time. It ended the way these things usually end, with something small and stupid. On the night of October 18, 1934, Floyd and Adam Ricchetti were driving through eastern Ohio in heavy fog when their car slid off the road into a telephone pole. Nobody was hurt, but the car was dead, and so, though he didn't know it yet, was Floyd. They sent their 2 women companions off with a tow truck and waited by the roadside, 2 men in suits sitting on a hillside at dawn in the middle of nowhere. A passing motorist thought that looked wrong and told the Wellsville police. When the local chief came up to check, the shooting started. One of them wounded an officer, and Ricchetti was taken. Floyd went up the hill firing and disappeared into the Ohio countryside on foot. For 3 days, the most wanted man in America hid in the woods like the hunted animal Steinbeck would one day call him. Every lawman in the eastern half of the state was hunting him, and for 3 days, not one of them could lay hands on a single exhausted man traveling on foot. He slept rough, begged food off farmhouses, and kept moving. On the afternoon of October 22nd, hungry and lost, he walked out of the trees to a farmhouse belonging to a widow named Ellen Conkle and told her he'd gotten turned around while hunting. She fed him spare ribs, potatoes, coffee, and pumpkin pie, and he ate all of it, pressed $1 into her hand, and asked to see the newspaper. The most wanted man in the country, reading his own headlines over a slice of pie. Minutes later, 2 cars full of federal agents and local police, led by Melvin Purvis, came up the lane. Floyd bolted across an open field with a pistol in his hand, and that field was the last place he ever went. The official version is clean. Floyd ran, Floyd drew, the agents fired, Floyd fell. But in a 1970s interview, an East Liverpool officer named Chester Smith, a First World War sniper who was standing in that field, told a very different story. Smith said he wounded Floyd first, and that Purvis then ordered an agent to finish the job at close range, to fire into a man who was already down. The FBI has denied it flatly for decades. I'd argue we'll never truly know which version is real. And the denial protests a little too hard for a bureau that had every reason in the world to want him quiet. Whatever happened out there, Floyd's last words came through clenched teeth. "I'm done for. You've hit me twice." He was 30. His final bank job had earned him a cut of about $120. The most wanted man in America died broke in a stranger's field. Adam Ricchetti went to Missouri's gas chamber 4 years later, the only man the law ever formally punished for Union Station, and plenty of people doubt he belonged there either. That's where the FBI's story ends and where Oklahoma's begins. Because here's how it actually ended for Charlie Floyd. 6 days after they killed him, they buried him at Aikens, Oklahoma, back in the hard hill country he'd come up in, and somewhere between 20 and 40,000 people came to watch them do it. The roads to that little cemetery were jammed for miles. It remains to this day the largest funeral the state of Oklahoma has ever held. Woody Guthrie wrote him a ballad about a man who paid off farmers' mortgages and left $1,000 bills on the tables of the poor, and whether or not Floyd ever did a single one of those things, the people who came to bury him believed it in their bones. To the government, he was public enemy number one, the face of the crime that armed the FBI. To the dispossessed of the Cookson Hills, he was one of their own who'd finally shot back at the banks that were taking everything they had. The movie gave him 5 minutes and the wrong gun and killed him in the wrong place, years too early. The people who actually knew him gave him the biggest funeral in the history of their state. And the one question that would settle which of them had him right, whether the man the FBI built itself on was even guilty, went into the ground at Aikens with him. It has never come back out.